My name is Elena Martinez. I'm 32 years old and I work as a high school counselor in a small town just outside Chicago. Some people might think my job is about helping teenagers navigate their complicated lives, but little did I know how complicated my own life would become. College feels like a lifetime ago now. That's where I met Daniel, a world apart from me in every possible way. I was studying psychology, driven by an insatiable curiosity about human emotions and connections. Daniel, with his crisp computer science textbooks and logical approach to everything, seemed like my complete opposite. Our first conversation happened in the university library. I was struggling with a particularly complex psychological theory. My notes spread across the table like a complicated emotional map. Daniel, who was sitting nearby, noticed my frustration and offered help, not with the psychology, but with the organization of my notes. He took out a perfectly sharpened pencil and started categorizing my messy research. "You think in feelings?" he said, arranging my scattered papers. "I think in systems." I should have been annoyed. Instead, I was fascinated. Here was someone who saw the world so differently from me, yet was willing to help without judgment. We started dating shortly after. Everyone around us saw something magical. My friends loved how Daniel brought structure to my spontaneous life. His tech friends appreciated how I brought warmth to his calculated world. We were like a perfect algorithm of human connection, different components working together to create something beautiful. Our differences complemented each other perfectly. I would get lost in the emotional stories of my students, seeing the world through feelings and empathy. Daniel would solve complex coding problems, seeing the world through logic and precise calculations. Together, we seemed unbreakable. When we got married 6 years ago, people would say we were the dream couple. Daniel in his neat button-up shirts, me in my colorful scarves, representing two sides of the same coin. Balance, harmony, love, or so we thought. Little did I know how quickly that perfect balance could shift. The first signs of change were so subtle, so incremental, that I didn't recognize them until they had completely reshaped our world. IT started with small things. Daniel would come home 30 minutes later than usual. Then, an hour. Soon, entire evenings would pass without him joining me for dinner. Texts replaced conversations. Working late. Don't wait up. Each message felt like a tiny wedge, slowly splitting us apart. I remember the first Tuesday it happened. I had spent hours preparing his favorite chicken enchiladas, a recipe passed down from my grandmother. The kitchen was filled with the warm, comforting aroma of home, of love. I set our wedding gift plates carefully, folded the cloth napkins just the way he liked, and waited. 9 o'clock came and went. The enchiladas grew cold. The kitchen's warmth faded, replaced by a growing chill of uncertainty. When Daniel finally walked in, he barely looked at the table. "Sorry," he mumbled, "big project at work." I wanted to cry. I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream, "What's happening to us?" Instead, I smiled. I reheated his dinner. I made excuses in my mind. Slowly, my internal dialogue became a torrent of self-doubt. Was I not interesting enough? Did I fail to understand his tech world? Was I too ordinary, too simple? These thoughts became my nightly companions. While Daniel slept peacefully beside me, I would lie awake, questioning every aspect of myself. Each missed dinner, each shortened conversation chipped away at my confidence. I started analyzing everything. The way I spoke, the stories I shared about my students, the jokes I told. Was I too emotional? Not exciting enough? The more I questioned, the more invisible I felt in our own home. Our connection was becoming a series of passing moments, brief texts, quick kisses, goodbye, silent dinners. And with each passing day, I felt more and more responsible for our growing distance. Little did I know, the real story was just beginning. Our wedding anniversary was supposed to be our lifeline, a chance to reconnect and remember why we fell in love. I planned everything meticulously the way Daniel loved things to be. The restaurant was his favorite, a quiet Italian place with soft lighting and vintage wine collections. I wore the blue dress he once said made my eyes shine, the one that had made him look at me with such intensity years ago. I even remembered to order the Chianti he loved, the same wine from our first date. But something was different. Daniel was physically present, yet emotionally absent. His eyes kept darting to his phone, fingers constantly scrolling, tapping. When I spoke about my day, a heartwarming story about a student I'd helped through a difficult time, his responses were mechanical. He would say. Or, okay, I tried harder. I told jokes, shared school stories, attempted to bridge the growing silence between us. But each attempt felt like throwing a pebble against a wall of indifference. Are you okay? I finally asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of frustration and fear. He looked up, almost surprised I was speaking. Yeah, just tired, he muttered. That moment was a crystal clear revelation. Our marriage wasn't just changing, it was dissolving. The connection we once had was now a distant memory, like an old photograph fading at the edges. Our conversations had become transactional. Can you buy milk? I'll be home late. No more inside jokes. No more spontaneous hugs. No more genuine connection. I realized we were two strangers sharing a home, sharing a life, but not sharing ourselves. The emotional distance was more profound than any physical separation. We were living parallel lives, touching, but never truly connecting. Daniel wasn't just working late. He was disappearing not just from our dinner table, but from our relationship. And I was letting it happen, hoping that if I was patient enough, understanding enough, things would magically return to how they were. But magic, I was learning, doesn't fix marriages. Honest communication does. And we were very far from that. I couldn't continue living in this uncertainty. The not knowing was eating me alive more than any potential truth could. I started investigating, not out of suspicion, but out of a desperate need to understand. I wasn't looking for evidence of betrayal. I was searching for understanding. What had happened to us? Where did our connection go? I began noticing details I'd previously ignored. The way Daniel's phone was always face down, his increased privacy about work, the subtle changes in his routine. Each observation felt like solving a complex psychological puzzle. Ironically, the very type of challenge my professional training had prepared me for. One evening, with a mixture of terror and determination, I decided to have a real conversation. No more avoiding, no more pretending. Daniel, I said, my voice shaking but surprisingly strong, we need to talk about what's happening to us. He looked exhausted, not just physically tired, but emotionally drained. And for the first time in months, he truly looked at me. Not through me, but directly into my eyes. I don't know, Elena, he admitted, his voice vulnerable. I'm lost in my work. I'm not sure who I am anymore. That moment was transformative. I realized Daniel's changes weren't my fault. Our struggle wasn't about blame, but about understanding. We decided to try couples therapy, not as a last-ditch effort to save our marriage, but as a commitment to understanding ourselves and each other. It wasn't about fixing something broken, but about growth and mutual respect. In therapy, layers of complexity unfolded. Daniel's startup was consuming him. The pressure, the constant innovation, the endless coding sprints, they were slowly erasing his sense of self. I was learning to articulate my needs, to set boundaries, to value myself beyond being just a supportive wife. Our therapist helped us see that we weren't falling apart. We were actually in the challenging process of transformation. Personal growth isn't linear. It's messy, uncomfortable, and sometimes looks like disconnection before reconnection. We didn't know if we would stay together, but for the first time, we were truly listening to each other. And that, I was learning, was the real definition of love. Therapy became our mirror, reflecting truths we had been too afraid to see. Daniel's constant work wasn't just about ambition, it was about survival. His startup was like a living, breathing orgasm demanding every ounce of his energy. He was drowning in expectations, in the tech world's relentless pressure to innovate, to be the next big thing. I learned that his distance wasn't a rejection of me, but a protective mechanism. He was so overwhelmed by work stress that emotional intimacy felt like another impossible task. Each late night, each missed dinner was not a statement about our love, but about his internal struggle. For myself, I discovered something profound. My self-worth had become dangerously entangled with Daniel's attention. I had been measuring my value through his responses, his engagement, his love. Therapy taught me a revolutionary concept. My worth was not determined by someone else's ability to see it. As a high school counselor, I constantly told my students about self-respect, about understanding their own value. Yet, I had forgotten to apply those lessons to my own life. The irony was not lost on me. Communication emerged as our most powerful tool. Not just talking, but truly listening. We learned to share our vulnerabilities, our fears, our individual struggles. Daniel started explaining the complex world of his startup. I shared the emotional landscapes of my counseling work. We were rebuilding connection through understanding. Individual growth became our shared language. We realized that a strong relationship isn't about being perfect together, but about supporting each other's personal journeys. Daniel needed space to navigate his professional challenges. I needed space to rediscover my sense of self. Our relationship was transforming from a dependent partnership to an interdependent alliance. We were two individuals choosing to walk alongside each other, not merge into one indistinguishable entity. The biggest lesson? Love is not about possession or constant proximity. It's about respect, individual growth, and the courage to stay connected even when paths temporarily diverge. We didn't know our final destination. But for the first time, we were traveling together not as desperate passengers, but as willing explorers. Our story wasn't about saving a marriage. It was about saving ourselves. And in that process, we might just save our love. Life doesn't come with a manual, and neither do relationships. What I've learned is that love is not a destination, but a continuous journey of understanding, growth, and sometimes radical transformation. Our society often romanticizes relationships as perfect, unchanging entities. We see love in movies and fairy tales as something that remains constant, untouched by life's complexities. But real love? Real love is messy. It's uncomfortable. It's about two imperfect people refusing to give up on each other. My journey with Daniel taught me that relationships are living, breathing ecosystems. They require constant nurturing, honest communication, and the courage to look inward. We aren't static beings. We change. We grow. We evolve. And our relationships must evolve with us. Honest communication became our lifeline, not the polite, surface-level conversations, but raw, vulnerable exchanges that exposed our fears, our struggles, our deepest insecurities. We learned that true intimacy isn't about agreeing on everything, but about creating a safe space to disagree with respect. To every person who has ever blamed themselves for their partner's changes, stop. Your worth is not a reflection of someone else's ability to see your value. You are not responsible for someone else's emotional journey. You are responsible only for your own growth, your own healing, your own happiness. Change is inevitable. Personal development is a choice. I want you to understand something powerful. Your partner does not complete you. They complement you. There's a significant difference. Completion suggests you are incomplete without them. Complementing means you are whole, choosing to walk together, supporting each other's individual paths. Daniel and I didn't know if we would stay together, but we knew we would continue growing, individually and together. We stopped seeing our relationship as a destination and started viewing it as a continuous, beautiful exploration. My message is simple but profound. Your self-worth is not a negotiable commodity. It is not defined by your partner's attention, your relationship status, or societal expectations. It is defined by your own understanding of your intrinsic value. Embrace change. Celebrate growth. Choose yourself always, because in the end, the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself.